Hey there, it's Mackenzie, your host of Winning. We're looking for sponsors for the podcast. If you have a business that you would like to promote to thousands of people, send us an email at podcastwinning@gmail.com or send us a message on social media. I cannot wait to hear from you. Now on to the show.
Winning is your guide to making it in business. Join our award-winning host and entrepreneur, Mackenzie Kilshaw, and special guests in casual conversations that will educate and inspire you on your business journey. Winning will help you learn the hard lessons the easy way with guidance from celebrated entrepreneurs and business leaders. It's fun. It's informative. It's winning.
Welcome to Winning. I'm Mackenzie Kilshaw, the host, and I have a special guest today, Janna Dutton. Hi, Janna.
Hi, Mackenzie. Good to see you.
You too. Janna's a friend of mine. She's also a huge inspiration for me. And just to give you a little bit of background on Janna, she's a Canadian entrepreneur. She's from Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. And she is well known as the owner of multiple locations of Tim Hortons, which I think everyone in the whole world knows about Tim Hortons. We don't have to tell you what that is. And she's a mom. She is in the community a lot. And honestly, the thing that I really admire about Janna is her philanthropy work. And I feel like people often say to me, Mackenzie, how do you have so much time to do what you do? And Janna, I look at you and I think, how on earth does Janna have enough time to do what she does? So that's a little bit about Janna. I'm so happy that you're on, and I'm really pumped for this next little bit of time with you.
Yeah, me too. I was excited that you asked me.
Yeah, it's awesome. So that's a little bit about Janna. Janna, do you want to just kind of tell me a little bit more about yourself and how did you get where you are today? Where did you start and how did you get there?
Well, that is a big, long story. There's a lot of little stories that go along with that. You know, somebody recently, it was one of my business coaches, asked me, how many lives do you think you've had? And he didn't mean in an occult kind of way. He was like you have had so many different things happen that your life has changed. And, you know, I think I said about 8. You know, like there's been that many different segments of my life where there's been such big change. But I grew up quite poor, single mom, like really poor, the kind of poor where you have like a condiment in the fridge and that's it, kind of poor. And it was really interesting because my mom, we had no money. So for something to do, she would tour me around like hospital home lottery houses and pray to homes and all the new homes because it was something that you could do for free, right? So we would go to all these new neighborhoods and we would walk around these houses for hours and hours and hours. And so when I was little, I said that I wanted to own one of these houses. And actually, I think I said I wanted to win one of these houses, right? And so I believe I'm not going to say in goal setting because a lot of people, including myself, grew up with a very bad intuitive piece about goals. There was something about the word goal that didn't sit well with me. But I do believe that whatever you set intention on kind of comes to be, like everything happens for a reason. So I had set my intentions that I was going to win one of these houses. And I believe that is actually one of the reasons I've been successful because it's just been playing in the background. And I was about 29 years old and I was living in this beautiful house and I went, holy, I am in my hospital home lottery house. It wasn't. And then as soon as I realized that, I went, no. I said I wanted to win the house, right? And so that's I earned it. It is even better, right? And so the world just put in my vision the opportunities, and I just had to reach out and grab them and take them. And with constant activity, I achieved it, right? So yeah, it's a big long story. I did put the first couple segments of that in a book that I have coming out. And so, I mean, maybe people have to pick up the book to read more.
I love that. And I am so pumped about your book. Like, to me, that's just crazy that you wrote a book and it's so exciting. We're going to talk about that a little bit too, because I think a lot of people are like, you wrote a book? Like, what? the heck? That's so cool. And I think it's so great that you're sharing your experiences with other people. So we'll talk more about the book, but make sure you pick it up because I'm going to get it because I want to know that about you. And we're friends and I don't actually even know your beginning. So I think that's really exciting. Okay, so you had these dreams about winning the lottery home. Did you have dreams about a career or something that you wanted to do?
I did. So the same kind of thing, we used to go and visit an uncle of mine in southern Saskatchewan, and we'd drive. And he was on a farm, and along the way there was kind of like the halfway point, and we'd stop at this restaurant for coffee or lunch or something. And going to a restaurant was quite a special thing. And so I always wanted to own a restaurant on the highway. So that's what I told my mom I was going to do when I was little. I was going to own a restaurant on the highway. And although it wasn't the first location I bought, because I had a partner in my first location, the first location I owned all on my own is a restaurant on the highway, and I still own that one. And so yes, I did have aspirations as to what I was going to do, and even the books. I've written down that I was going to have books, and at the time I wrote that, I thought, geez, I don't have any books, and yeah, so it just keeps coming. It just keeps coming, and there's more to come. I just don't know what it is yet. So
that's amazing. And you know what? Yeah. I feel like when you say there's more to come, if you would have asked me a few years ago, would you have a podcast? I'd be like, what the heck am I going to talk about? Right? Like, no, why would I do that? And now I feel like talking to people like you that have gone on this journey and can inspire others and know that, like you said, you started out in your life with not a lot, right? And look where you are now. And I can tell you, I've been to Janna's house and it's a show home. It is beautiful. So you've made it, but I feel like you're so far past that now, right? Like you've got your first book. There's going to be more, I'm sure. And I know that we'll probably have you on again sometime in the future and hear about kind of your next things too. So, okay. So tell me a little bit more, your business, your expertise. I mean, we know about Tim Hortons, and I love hearing that because it's such a cool thing. Because I think a lot of people too don't even realize that Tim Hortons has an owner. I think a lot of people think, well, it's a big company. It's just a company owns it. So tell me a little bit about how you got to Tim Hortons, but then also let's branch a little bit into your philanthropy too, and how has Tim's been able to help you with that?
I just got goosebumps because I think realistically, a lot of people don't understand that I'm a small business owner, not unlike you were, right? And so as a small business owner, I believe in giving to the community. And I grew up that way, even when we had nothing, whatever we had, we shared. And because of my mom's modeling of that, I've done that all along. And so when I started with Tim Hortons, I've always said and empowered my managers as I've grown a little bit bigger that you always give something, because it takes more time to explain to somebody why you can't give them something than it does to give them a travel mug for their prize table or something for their prize table, right? And it might not be what they had hoped for when they came in, but I try not to say no to anybody. So I support a lot of organizations in the community in a small way, and then some in a bigger way. So how I got to Tim Hortons, so I was married, and I was married in my early 20s, and I was working as a bookkeeper and loved bookkeeping, and so my husband at the time, my oldest kid's dad, he wanted to have a franchise. He was an entrepreneur and he didn't want to reinvent the wheel again, he said. So he was in the process of selling his business. And so we had applied with many, many, many franchises and interviewed with the likes of like Canadian Tire and companies like that. There was another donut chain that isn't quite as popular anymore. And when we sent in our application with them, they actually wanted a $5,000 check. And this was 20 years ago. So that was a lot of money. A lot of money. Yeah. And they wanted a $5,000 check just to sit down and talk. So needless to say, we didn't go with them. And obviously
that's why they're not very big anymore. Right?
Yeah. And Tim Hortons was the most professional to deal with. And the other advantage of Tim Hortons is we got to stay where our families were. So we got to stay home in Saskatoon. So that was back in 2001 when we did our application and started. And to put it in perspective, you know, at the time I was driving a Dodge Shadow, and it had no heat, like the heater didn't work.
Yeah.
And here we were becoming Tim Hortons owners. We literally poured everything into the venture, and we drove out to Ontario in this little Dodge Shadow and did all of our training and drove back, and we lived in not a great neighborhood. And so, yeah, it was really different times. And, you know, I remember I would like eat every day when I would leave the restaurant. And I remember saying, you know, are we going to go broke? Like if I could take a meal every day, you know,
it's scary when you first start, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. It's hard when you first start. And so we sacrificed a lot, and we put in the time and we put in the effort. You know, I was the size of like a pin, you know, when we started, and I was working, you know, 60, 70, 80 hours a week, unloading the truck. And we used to get these huge 40-pound bags of flour and little, I think the flour weighed half as much as I did. Like I was so tiny at the time, and had a baby that first year as well. So she started coming to the restaurants with me and she grew up in the restaurant. And yeah, so times were just really different, but it was a worthwhile venture. And, you know, you get what you put in the time for, right? So you get what you give.
100%. And everything in life, I think, right? Yeah. And I mean, there's nothing compares to hard work. Like if people think that their journey is going to be easy, you're wrong, right? Yeah. Like you need to put.
If you like it feels easy.
Yeah. It does. Yeah. It does. It doesn't feel like work, right? That's what I always say. If you love what you do, it doesn't feel like work. But the time is definitely time and money, obviously, but the time that you put in, I think makes all the difference, because especially like you said, you were there working and doing things and people would see you there, right? So the owner's there. Yes. And that also makes people want to come to your business when they know that it's a family, right? You own it. Your daughter's there. That makes people want to support you. So I think that's really special. That's good memories.
It is a good memory. And what I have found that I've taught my kids that has been the most important lesson, I think, with them growing up, because they grew up with a lot more privilege than I did, right? And so I've taught them that money is an exchange for service. So if you want more money, you have to either give more or better service. So when they used to come home, well, I guess they still do, and say, hey, Mom, can I have $30 to go to a movie? I'll say, well, what is money? And invariably, they all know the answer. So they all roll their eyes or sigh, you know, and they say it's an exchange for service. And I'm like, okay, so in exchange for the $20 or $30 you'd like to go for a movie, what service can you provide me? You know what I mean? That it would help me so that I can give you some money. I'll trade you for the money, right? And so they usually stomp away, but then they come back and say, well, how would I do this, this, and this? And I'm like, yeah, that sounds like a good trade for service, and they get their money. But that's all money is, and that's where, if you put in the time and put in the hours and put in the effort, that's more service that you're providing the community. So yeah.
I love that. And for people that don't have the money to, you know, when we're talking about philanthropy and giving back to the community, a lot of times, right, it's like, well, I can't give you $100, $500, but I can give you my time, right? I can come to your event, or I can volunteer, or I can do something. And I think that a lot of times we forget about that. It's not just things, right? It's that time aspect.
Yes. And it's time, it's knowledge, it's sharing expertise. There's a lot of things that you have to give. And I find that that's a common question, you know, what have I to give, right? And I did a fundraiser a few years ago, and you were very supportive of that fundraiser, and I appreciate it. But it was for an air ambulance, and they gave me something in exchange for my time and contribution to them. They gave me the faith that I could raise the money. It was so interesting. You know, I sat across the table from them when they asked me, and I thought, why are they asking me? And I remember I was in a very unresourceful state. You know, I was looking down, I was like, why are they asking me to do this? And I thought, don't they know I can't talk to people? I'm an introvert. So I do like my thinking and alone time. And I looked up at them in the moment, and thank goodness I raised my head, because they were all excited on the other side of the table. And I looked at them and I said, you think I can do this? And they said, well, of course we do, or we wouldn't have asked you.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And so I thought, if you think I can do it, why would I think I couldn't? So I accepted the challenge of doing it. And they had asked me to raise $50,000. And as I was walking out the door, I thought, if they think I can raise 50, I'm sure I can raise 100. And so, I went out and we created a mastermind group that was just so engaging, and it kept us all involved. And over the course of time leading up to the event, we raised, I think it was about $70,000 we went into the event with, and we ended up just over 100,000. And so it's just, they did give me something in exchange, and it was that belief. So it was really good.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I think one thing for sure that I've learned in the last few years is usually the only person holding you back is yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Yeah. So I can't do that. How on earth am I going to do that? What am I going to do? They asked the wrong person, right? That's your first thought. And I was similar. I did a fundraiser as well, and I had to dance in front of 1,000 people and raise money. And you know what? When they asked me, I felt the same as you, because I was like, they asked me for a reason. They didn't ask me because they thought I would do bad or wouldn't raise any money. They asked because I thought I could. So I better stand up and do this. And I was scared. I don't know if you felt that. I was like, holy geez, how I got to start brainstorming. Like you said, you had the mastermind. It's how can I get other people to help me do this? And look at that, $100,000 you raised. That's incredible. That's incredible.
Well, and that's the thing. We all ask ourselves questions. Excuse me, I just need to sip a...
Yeah.
So we all ask ourselves questions all the time. And I found that my question that I used to ask myself automatically was, what if I fail? So somebody would say something, and the automatic question that would pop into my head would be, what if I fail? And so I trained myself to ask a better question, right? So where is this going to take me? What can I learn from this? And so it's only by practicing that, though, that you get that it becomes a habit, because that limiting question is a habit as well. And the only way to replace it is to replace it with something else. And so what if I fail has stopped me from doing a lot of things in the past. And I'm hoping what will I learn from this will propel me forward into my future too. So yeah, I'm right there with you. What are people going to think? What if I fail? Fear, criticism, and failure is what hold most people back.
Exactly. And you know what? At the end of the day, so you fail. So let's say you quote unquote only raised 50,000 instead of 100. You raised 50,000.
Yeah.
I'll say to my husband all the time, so what if it doesn't work out? What happened? Are we alive tomorrow? Yes. Can we move on? Yes. You're right. Can we learn something? Yes. And part of being a business owner and an entrepreneur is trying things out and seeing what happens, right? And sometimes you're going to fail. There's things that are going to flop, and there's other things that are going to soar. So you're never going to be able to soar unless you try, right? You have to give it that shot.
That's right. Yeah, you got to try. And yeah, it's really quite a miraculous thing when you give yourself permission to try.
It's so true. And at the end of the day, you're still here, right? So it's amazing that you blew that $50,000 ask out of the water. And that is amazing.
Somebody asked me a while ago, what made you different though? You grew up with a bunch of other people that grew up in the same circumstances and the same neighborhood, went to the same school. Why do you think that you ended up where you are? And the only answer I could give, but it was because I truly believe this, was because of my giving, and you got to start where you are. I think that's that's something I learned a long time ago. You can't keep up with the Joneses. And in order to become a Jones, you have to start somewhere, right? The Joneses started somewhere too, right? So you got to start where you are. And so on that campaign, I actually went out with the message of just give $1. If everybody in our entire province gave $1, we would have raised over $1 million.
Yeah.
So don't not give because you feel that you're not giving enough. Just give. And you're giving, no good deed goes unpunished, right? So your giving is going to come back to you in some way or form, right? And it's only by giving that we truly, receive more. And I think the more I give, the more joy and happiness I experience. So now I feel like what drives me now is how can I earn more money so I can give more? It's like, I want to give more, so I have to earn more. So that's the kind of yin yang that I kind of work with.
Yeah, that's great. And I think you're right on the money there. It's the feeling, right?
Oh.
It's that internal, when you can help someone else, that is way better than money in the bank, and it just gives you that feeling of accomplishment and helping somebody that needs it, right? And every one of us at some point in our life are going to need help from someone, a variety of ways, but you're paying it forward, right? Because someone's going to help you when you need it. And that's a great thing.
Yeah. You invest early so you can get the dividends later, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Janna, did you have a major turning point in your career, or did you have ever a time that you were, you had to pivot or you changed? I mean, I know you went from a bookkeeper to a franchise owner. That's pretty big, but was there any other times that really were impactful for you?
Yeah, there's been a few, and you can only see the TSN turning point when you're looking backwards, right? And I can see a couple of them in my life, and one of them I had moved away when I was 19 years old. My mom was going to go on a vacation to Vancouver Island, and I said, "What? You're going to go without me? You're not going to take me with you?" And she says, "Well, if I take you there, you're going to want to move there." And I said, "Don't be silly. Why would I want to move away?" And so she agreed to take me on the vacation with her, and we went out to Vancouver Island for a week, and we came back. And 9 days later, I had sold my car, sold my furniture, and was on a train out on the way to Vancouver, and then on the ferry to Vancouver Island, and I lived there for several years. And I do believe that was a turning point, because although I was me, everybody here knew me as a certain person. It was Janna that grew up, in Pleasant Hill, or it was Janna that, doesn't have anything or wore holy shoes, or I don't know. But I think that also was in my own head, right? Of course, nobody was holding that against me. But, so when I moved out to Vancouver Island, I was still me, but I didn't have any of that attached. And so I think that was a turning point for me, because I just worked hard, and people, in a time when it was hard to get a job, people were phoning me to see if I could work. And so that was definitely a TSN turning point for me. And then after I moved back, deciding to, I think, leave my husband was a turning point. It's such a hard decision, right? It's such a hard decision to do that. And, didn't want to hurt him, was scared for me, and didn't want to hurt the kids.
Of course.
But it was a turning point for me in that I had grown enough to understand that although it wasn't that I didn't love him, I had learned to love myself enough to understand that it just wasn't the right relationship for me. Yeah. And so that was a really, really big turning point for me too. And I don't know, something in me changed in the moment I made the decision. I think that, it's like the Grinch, my heart grew 10 times that day. There was just a big shift there as well.
Well, and your personal life and your relationships with, your spouse and your friends, your family, it's really different when you're an entrepreneur and a business owner, because you don't often get to, just close your computer and go home and spend the time. So I totally understand that, and if you're not fulfilled and in the place that you should be, everything else is going to suffer.
Yeah. Yeah. And I, you kind of divorce not from just a person, from a family, from traditions, from all the things, right? And so it's very hard and very difficult. But as an entrepreneur, you're right. In particular, you don't, I'm friendly with, sorry, I just heard someone come home, but
Okay.
I'm friendly with my staff. But, I also recognize that you can't have close friendships with your staff. And so you have to find those friendships elsewhere and find those mentors and people to help you elsewhere. So
For sure. Yeah. Because at the end of the day, you're the boss. I'll say, I don't want to say the boss, but I mean, you're the boss, and it is hard if you have those friendships with your staff. It's great if you feel like a family, but there's going to be some really hard conversations. And there's times where it's like, but we're friends. How, it's like, that's difficult. And I understand that. I had small business. I had staff that I was very close with, but it's hard to have those hard conversations then when you're so close. So you're right. Be close, but not too close. Have those other people in your life that are going to be your go-to people, right?
A huge thank you to our sponsor, Just For You Day Spa and Wellness. Just For You is Canada's premier day spa with 5 locations in Alberta and Saskatchewan. The award-winning luxury spa features Leah Reese cosmetics and iconic Betty jewelry that you can also purchase online. Visit www.justforyoudayspa.com to book your service or to purchase a gift card.
yeah, that's right. It's really difficult to have those tough conversations because sometimes you have to deliver hard news or difficult news. And so, yeah, it's lonely at the top. It's a common expression, but it really is. And sometimes you have big decisions to make, and they're difficult.
Before we hit record, Janna and I were kind of just visiting at the beginning, and we talked about that, being an entrepreneur and a business owner is you oftentimes, I say, you feel like you're on an island, right? Because a lot of people don't understand it. And a lot of times it's like, okay, I'm the owner of all these Tim Hortons franchises, and I'm in the community, and I don't know what to do right now. I kind of need help. Where do you go, right? Who do you ask? And so things like the podcast, I mean, this is where we know you're the same as me and the same as the person just starting out and the person that's been doing it for 30 years. We've all felt that. And just knowing that other people go through the same things as you, I think is really empowering and inspiring because, like you say, it's lonely and everybody's feeling that at some point too, right?
They are. And I think providing that mentorship and kind of giving that hand up and bringing somebody else as you come is really important. So
yeah, I agree.
And a lot of fun too.
I'm sure lots of times people ask you for advice or help, and I know I get it too, and I'm always willing to give it. Hence, I started a podcast to give it.
Right.
But I think I had people like that when I first started. If they were like, sorry, I don't know, or I can't help you, I mean, that would have been devastating. And just giving that little piece, you never know what comes from it. I did a lecture for a university class, an entrepreneurial class at the University of Saskatchewan. And that's where I went. So they asked me to come back, which I thought was really cool. And I had that moment like you, why the heck are they asking me? What could I give? But I thought, no, I'm going to do it. And I went and I talked to this class and, you talk to them, you answer questions and you go home. Right. And about a year and a half after that, I got an Instagram message from, a woman, I guess I don't want to say a girl, but she was in her early 20s. And she said, you talked at my entrepreneurial class. And while I was still in university, I decided I love baking. I decided I was going to start a cupcake business. And you were the reason. And I was like flabbergasted. I was crying reading this message because I thought, all I did was speak to a class, but I didn't realize, that this person was sitting there thinking, I can do it. She did it, right? I have to start somewhere. And it just warmed my heart because I helped someone. And honestly, I didn't even realize the impact of that one class that I spoke to. So
Oh,
it's
I'm so
so,
excited for you to have that opportunity. What an honor.
yeah, I mean, I think because it came out of nowhere, right? It was an Instagram message and it literally warmed my heart. So we never know what someone else is getting from us, right? And I think that's part of why we give. And I know for you, we've talked a little bit about your philanthropy, but I'm sure it's impacted your business too, because people, not that they're just coming to you for things, but they're coming to you for inspiration too. And that's really important.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that, Mackenzie. Thanks for saying that.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, I want to talk about your book because when I found out you were writing a book, I literally was like, how does she have time for this? How do you write a book? I'm like, where do you even start for that? So I think, first of all, let's just chat about the inspiration. So what I know you said long ago, you wrote down you want to write a book, but what inspired you now to write the book? And then also tell us a little bit about the book too.
Okay, so a few little stories intertwined in this. So when I was a young girl, I had the opportunity to go to the library and listen to an author read a part of her book. Her name was Jean Little. And I remember thinking, wow. And I really was a book lover growing up. And I remember sitting kind of on the ground, kind of at her feet and looking up at her and just thinking like, wow, this is so amazing that you have this book. So last October, I really was struggling with this goal setting thing. And like I mentioned earlier, goals were a really difficult thing for me to set. I didn't resonate well with the word. And one of my mentors had asked me what I wanted. And I said, I don't need anything. And he said, I didn't ask you what you needed. I asked you what you wanted, and so what I ended up changing the question to is, what would I be doing if I knew I couldn't fail? And so the first thing that came out of my pen when I wrote that was I would finish my books. And I thought, interesting. I don't have any books. But one thing that I had started was in 2019, I had gone into one of our community schools and I'd given kids a lot of books for Christmas. And it was just a thing I did because coming from the neighborhood, I wanted to give back to the neighborhood. And when I was leaving the classroom, the teacher said, now, children, for how many of you is this the first book you're going to own? So all these kids put up their hands, and I was, it was really, truly an emotional experience that I had that day. And almost crying, I left the classroom and I said to her, don't do that to me, and she said, well, I knew you'd understand. And so I left and I thought, there's no way I can afford to give every kid that doesn't have a book. And so I started the process of doing a kid's book at that time. So I thought when that came out of my pen, I thought, well, that must be what I was thinking of, was this kid's book. So the kid's book is in the process as well. It's really close, but it won't be the first one coming out. And so what happened during the pandemic, I had noticed that a lot of my guests were coming in and they weren't the same guests I used to have. Everybody, it was fun to go out to Tim's, it was always groups at the community table. It was different things like that. And instead it was one person coming in, people were sad during that time. And so based on the inspiration of a gentleman who had reached out to me on LinkedIn, and I had met him through LinkedIn, and watching what he had done in the early days of the pandemic, he was meeting with strangers. And so I reached out to him and said, I really like what you're doing. Do you mind if I adopt these, this concept that you've kind of reached out to me with even? And he said, well, of course, go do it. And so I called it Conversations Over Coffee. And so I was trying to build on my skill of learning to talk to people, because when I had done my fundraiser, I couldn't talk to people.
Yeah.
And I was losing that skill being kind of secluded at home all by myself. So I started reaching out to strangers, and I sent out messages to people I either wanted to know and never had met, or people that I admired, people that I had met but maybe hadn't had a conversation with, didn't know anything about them. And I started reaching out to them on LinkedIn and saying, hey, I know we've never spent time together, but how about a coffee? I know a place. And
was that scary, Janna? Because being an introvert and reaching out to people that you don't really know. I mean, I'm clearly an extrovert, but even that, it's like a cold call. I'd get a little nervous about that.
It was very scary. And I remember having so I said to the gentleman I'm with now, I said to him, I think I'm going to do this. And he said to me, like, who in the heck would do that? And I was like, oh, oops, but I went ahead anyway. And yes, hitting send on that first message was frightening. And then once I hit send once, twice, 5 times, 10 times, and it got a lot easier and easier and easier. And I think I sent out about 20 or 30 messages in December of 2020 to invite these chats to start in 2021. And didn't get any responses for a while, but slowly they started to trickle in. And some people said no, and other people accepted. And so the conversation started. And so I'd have a conversation with people and I'd get to know them a little bit. And people would ask, well, what do you ask? Like, what, you must have standard questions. And I was like, well, not really. Sometimes I'd ask them, what they learned from the whole pandemic and stuff. But generally speaking, there was no agenda. I just went in with the intention and the genuine purpose of just learning about them. And so we had all these conversations. I think there's about 75 or 80 posted now on LinkedIn, and probably about 20 behind I am in posting, because I just, you would know with social media, it's really tough to keep up. So I've got a list of people still to post, and I still have conversations today. And with the book, what happened was in April of this year, so April 2022, I got asked to contribute to a book. And so to write a chapter. And this woman had asked me for years. And every time she asked me, I would think, that's a really neat idea, but who would want to hear my story? Right. Yeah. And so I always said no. And when she asked me this year, well, one thing I learned in between the last time she had asked me and this year was that when you poo-poo your own story and you don't think it's big enough, when people are experiencing the same thing, it kind of almost sends a little bit of disrespect to them, right? They think that you've done something quite incredible. And by not acknowledging what you've done, you kind of disrespect their feelings, right? So I thought, well, you know what? I don't think my story is anything because I'm the one living it, right? A fish doesn't know he's in water either, right? So so I said yes. And it was very scary to say yes, but I did. So in the process of doing that chapter for that book, I was on one of the calls for marketing or something, and I sat there and I was looking at all the women in this book. And I thought, this is like a community. And I thought, I have a community that I've grown through these conversations. And so I broached the idea with the publisher and said, maybe I could do my own book, and I could offer all these people that I've had conversations with the opportunity to tell a bit of their story. And they said, that might work, and so one of my conversations with a gentleman by the name of Paul Martin, I say he's a famous Saskatchewan person, and
I think you're right.
Yeah. And so one of the conversations I had with him, and so I think it must have been the next day or right after this call when I had this, light bulb moment, and he was talking at a luncheon. And so I went up and asked him, I said, what do you think of this book idea? And he said, I'll be chapter 1. And so, and I went,
never asked him.
What's that?
If you would have never asked him, right? If you wouldn't have, it would have never happened.
Yes.
That's right.
So
Back
he said, I'll be
our
chapter 1.
Conversation a few minutes ago, right?
Yeah.
You gotta just do it.
Gotta just do it. So I asked him and I went, oh, well, he must think it's a good idea then if he would be chapter 1. And so then I asked somebody else, and I mentioned that Paul said he would be number one, and they said, well, I'll be number two, you know,
Yeah.
and I filled out one volume so quickly that we had to do a second volume. So we've actually got 2 books coming out.
Oh,
2.
that's amazing. Honestly,
Yeah.
it's so like, be proud of yourself and keep telling your story, because as we just talked about too, you never know who that inspires or touches, or, you know, someone. COVID was it. You're right. It was such a hard time.
Yeah.
And there were so many little things that we each took from there. But if we never share any of that, right, it's gone. So I love that you've written a book. And I love that it's, you know, Saskatchewan based, and it's where we're both from and live. But people anywhere in the world can read this book. And
Well, anywhere in the world. And we do have a couple authors from outside of Saskatchewan too. So each book has 23 co-authors, and everybody has a chapter. And we have some people, we've got some from the United States, some from Alberta, a couple from Ontario. So it wasn't, with our technology that we have today, it wasn't limited to just who I could meet here, although that's the way the conversation started. It ended up being people were reaching out to me from afar and asking if they could have a coffee as well. So
that's
that was
so
really
cool.
fun.
That's so cool. Okay, I've got a couple of rapid fire questions here, 2 of them, that I think really important for people, you know, if they're just starting out a business or their entrepreneurial journey, or if they've, you know, been around for a while. I mean, advice and inspiration helps everyone. So the first one is the most important lesson that you can share.
I would say give until it hurts, and give unapologetically. If you can only give $10, give the $10 and don't say, I can only give $10. Say, here's $10, I'm so glad I can support you. Here's $10, right? So give until it hurts. And it does come back in spades. You just can't, sometimes it's hard to see it at the moment. And the other thing would be, we kind of live, one of my mentors called it the vacuum law of prosperity. He said, you have to make room for the things you want. And so, if you don't like your curtains, right, and you want new curtains, until you make yourself feel the pain of needing the curtains, you don't buy the curtains. So take the curtains down so that everybody can see you through the window. And when you start feeling awkward about people seeing you, you'll go out and buy the new curtains.
That's right.
Right? Yeah. So I think that would probably be the other little snippet, right? You got to make room, space for the things you want. You got to get rid of the old habits. You got to get a new habit. Yeah.
Yeah. That's awesome. And one thing that you wish you had known? I don't know if there's just one for me. There's probably about 50, but.
Yeah. Oh, there's probably hundreds of that I wish I had known sooner at least. Yeah. And, I still have these realizations and things dawn on me like, oh, if only I'd known that sooner. But first of all, don't punish yourself when you figure it out. Don't punish yourself for not doing it, because now you do. So when you know better, you can do better, right? And so I would say, I think learning that my mind never shuts off was probably a really important learning. I told my daughter this the other day, or was having a discussion with her, and we were talking about it. And I said, your mind doesn't shut off when you go to bed. I said, so tell it what you want, and I said, maybe you'll have an answer in the morning, right? And so if you want to have good dreams, kind of say, I want to have dreams about this, this, and this, or, I need a science project idea, what are my favorite things to do that I could turn into a science project, and go to sleep thinking that, and you might just wake up with the answer, right? And so if I could have learned anything a long time ago, that probably would have been it. Or perhaps perspective is everything too. Everybody has a lot of the same content. We all experienced the pandemic.
That's right.
Everybody in the world.
Yep.
And so this,
the only time ever in our life, probably, that we all went through.
I hope, the same thing. But depending on your attitude towards it, depended on how you felt about it, right? So if you thought, this is going to be a great time for me to spend some time with my family and, stuff like that, you really looked at the whole circumstance differently. So it's the context you wrap your content in. And I wish I had learned that earlier as well.
Yeah, I agree. Because sometimes looking at the glass half full gets you a lot further than looking at it half empty, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Okay. The book, where can we get the book? How do I buy it? Because I want to go on it as soon as I can.
Yep. So November 8th, volume 1 will launch. I think, in fact, that's like when this is going to be posting. I think you told me, so that's awesome. So
today,
volume 1. Yeah. And so it's called Conversations Over Coffee. And that'll be volume 1. Volume 2 will be on November 15th. They will both launch on Amazon in Kindle version. So Amazon.ca. And we really would love to hit bestseller, Amazon bestseller of the day. So we're hoping that everybody will go on today and buy volume 1. And then on November 15th, buy volume 2. It'll be special pricing. And the way Amazon works is the more you sell and the more comments you receive, well, it's like anything, like social media, like anything. It's all computer analytics, right? So the more we sell off the top and the more comments we receive, hopefully we can get that badge of Amazon bestseller. And if we do that, of course, we'll create 44 best-selling authors, and it'll just be a lot of fun. And it's been so rewarding to work with everybody. And I've learned a lot of lessons in the process too. So that's where you can find it. And sorry, door just opened. So that's where you can find the book. And then all of our authors have some copies, and I'm sure they'll all be looking to sell their copies, and they'll be on sale for $20 with the local authors. So
I love it. I am definitely going to get that today.
Yeah.
We're pre-recording this, obviously, but I'm going to go on and get it today.
I have an idea. So anybody that goes on and buys the Amazon copy and comments, if they would like an autographed copy from me, if they just take a snapshot of their comment on Amazon, I'll autograph a copy. I'll autograph their purchased copy for them. They just have to, I'll mail it out to them with their shipping or whatever. And yeah, okay, so I'll autograph the copy if they buy it on Kindle. So
okay, this is awesome. So make sure you get your copy today. Janna, where can people find you? I know you have a website, but do you want to give us your website, maybe your Instagram handle, or wherever you want people to be able to learn more about you? Because I know that people are going to want to hear some more. So
thanks, Mackenzie. JannaDutton.com, Janna, 2 N's. And I think it has links to pretty much everything on my website, but my favorite social is LinkedIn. And then I spend a little bit of time on Instagram as well. So Janna Dutton on both of those platforms as well. And yeah, I write back still. And LinkedIn is one of those places where you can still connect with the owners, right? So it's kind of fun. So I do see all my messages still. I don't have somebody filtering those out. So you can message me, and we're trying to set it up so that we can have more coffees, and maybe we'll do a volume 3 in the new year.
Oh, well, I look forward to it. And
maybe you could do a chapter for us, Mackenzie. We'd love to have you.
Well, maybe. Yeah. Let me know. I'd love to. I'd love to be involved somehow. So please do let me know. Janna, thank you so much. This was awesome. I'm so happy that you said yes. And when I text you and say, will you be on my podcast? You're like, of course I will. So thank you. You absolutely made my day. I cannot wait to read your book. And we'll have all of your information on our social media as well, so people can find your links there, and look forward to hearing more from you too.
Yeah, you rock, Mackenzie. I really appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Janna. All right, everybody. Thanks so much for tuning in. We're going to sign off now, and we will see you next week.
Thanks for listening to Winning. Be sure to subscribe to get all of our new episodes. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please share it with others. Post about it on social media, and leave a rating and review wherever you listen to Winning. To catch all of the latest from us, you can follow Winning Podcast on Instagram at winning_podcast, Facebook at Winning Podcast, and on Twitter at Winning Pod. Winning was created and is produced by me, Mackenzie Kilshaw. Music created by Summer Furby. Editing by Seth Armstrong. Special thanks to Shauna Foster for voicing our opening. And of course, a huge thank you to this episode's guest. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you on the next episode.